Hey, what's happening, friend? Big Dog Ethan here. You're listening to WMTS 88.3 FM in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And this is none other than The Unnatural State of Affairs, where we discuss all the notable developments in our unnaturally corrupt American political system. So here's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to share a few thoughts on that vice presidential debate last week. I'll also talk about a recent interview that I had on the Kennel and how it reaffirmed my podcast purpose. Finally, recognizing that today is October 7th, I'll be closing out with a retrospective on Israel's genocidal response and where the Biden administration's support for it has left us. So, vice presidential candidates J.D. Vance and Tim Walz debated last Tuesday. Now, I'm bumping into the mic there. My bets were on Tim Walz for scoring the win. Well, I definitely would have won that bet. I was underwhelmed by Walz's performance. For one, y'all, J.D. Vance is polling so bad. I'm going to pull up the source view here. This is according to Gallup. Vance is the least liked Republican vice presidential candidate at this point in time compared to all Republican VP picks since 2000. Probably has something to do with the fact that Vance did a total 180 on his opinion of Trump when he saw the writing on the wall. This comes from a September 27th article in The Nation. Quote, Vance, a millionaire venture capitalist who wrote a cynical book about his Appalachian roots, has, like Trump, long tried to present himself as a champion of working class Americans. Once a stark critic of Trump, who suggested that the billionaire real estate developer was a quote-unquote reprehensible human being who might be quote-unquote America's Hitler, Vance changed his tune as he began to pursue a career in Republican politics. The suddenly enthusiastic Republican claimed to have adjusted his viewpoint after being impressed by Trump's presidency. Quote, I've been very open that I did say those critical things, and I regret them. And I regret being wrong about the guy, Vance signaled in 2021 as he was bidding for the Ohio U.S. Senate seat that he eventually won in 2022 with Trump's backing. Quote, I think he was a good president. I think he made a lot of good decisions for people, and I think he took a lot of flack, unquote. Now, we learn that in private, Vance remained a critic for nearly all of Trump's presidency. The Trump-Vance campaign now claims that the conflicting statements from the vice presidential nominee are being misinterpreted, but it is hard to misread the senator from Ohio's blunt assertion that Trump quote, thoroughly failed to deliver on his economic populism, unquote. The truth, as revealed by his own words, is that Vance was not nearly so impressed with Trump's economic record as he claimed to be when he was trying to win the former president's favor, a pursuit that would eventually be rewarded with a place on the Republican Party's 2024 ticket. Indeed, the direct messages that the Post obtained revealed that Vance apparently rejected a chance to join the Trump administration. Quote, I've already turned down my appointment from the Emperor, wrote Vance, who referred to the former president as Emperor Trump. Now, of course, Vance claims that Trump was a great emperor or president, and of course, Vance is lying, unquote. So, even if you love Vance for his horrendous policies, you cannot deny that he is nothing but a spineless careerist freak. And he should have been an easy target for Vance in last Tuesday's debate. Unfortunately, Walz did not deliver the decisive victory that I was expecting. There was no hammering on Vance's fake-ass man of the people persona that he miraculously picked up from his Yale career and from his good old private equity buds. Of course, he gave full-throated support for Israel, the apartheid state that's plausibly committing genocide as we speak. And might I note, as I mentioned in the first upload I did for this semester, it's also negatively impacting their political chances or their electoral chances for victory this November. It's probably the biggest weakness of the Harris campaign so far, and he didn't even provide any difference between himself and Vance on that issue. So I think it's safe to say that no progressive voters were won over at this debate. And most importantly, no couch fucking meme jokes were thrown out. None whatsoever. No couch fucking references whatsoever. That was a major bummer from that debate. But again, it's not like the guy lost. Walz did walk away with the win after 3 pretty eye-opening fails from J.D. Vance. There was Vance's awkward dodge from affirming the 2020 election results. He literally just said, Tim, I don't want to focus on the past. I want to focus on the future. Like, dog, you can ignore the past for, stealing like your best friend's like McDonald's fry or something like that, like the last fry of his large fry that he had been munching on. But you don't move past lying about the results of a presidential election. That's not something that you just move on from. So there was that. Of course, there was also Vance's terrible abortion position, which is definitely going to be a major hurdle for Republicans to navigate this election season. And then on top of it, too, J.D. Vance whined to the moderators about being fact-checked. They fact-checked him on the whole, Haitian immigrants in Springfield eating the cats and eating the dogs, which is just patently false. According to Kyle Kalinske, he's like the host of the Secular Talk podcast I watch. According to him, at least, apparently that's a rumor that literally originated from a neo-Nazi forum called Blood Tribe. So yeah, there's literally no validity to that assertion. Even the fucking governor of Ohio, who's a Republican, came out and said, yeah, this is total bullshit. We don't have any reports of Haitian immigrants eating cats or eating dogs. It's insane. So Vance complained to the moderator after getting fact check on that, because he was like, I thought you said you weren't going to do any fact checks. Why aren't you letting me lie? Oh, just horrible performance from Vance. And he seemed a little more composed. He seemed a little more, vice presidential, I guess, in terms of his style. But, you can put a bow tie on a pig and it still makes it a pig. And that's exactly what J.D. Vance came off as in that vice presidential debate. J.D. Vance just did not beat the smarmy Catholic convert Yale boy accusations in this debate. Now, I'm not even going to prep clips for y'all. I'll just include a link to the full debate in the description so you can watch it for yourself. We got a hell of a lot more substantive things to get to, and shameless plug here. I've already got a bonus episode for my honors thesis podcast discussing all of my in-depth thoughts on the debate with the legendary Big Dog Jay Duda, coming out real soon. That episode is going to be coming out real soon. I've already got it recorded. We recorded it last Wednesday, but had to sit on it because I did not want to let that bury this really cool interview I did with Democratic candidate Lori Bergman for Congressional District 6 of Tennessee. I've got a lot more thoughts I want to share on that interview with you. And, well, yeah, I mean, there's nothing else that's terribly pressing to share on the VP debate. So I'm just going to leave it at that. So last Friday, I uploaded an interview with the Democratic candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives in District 6 of Tennessee. Now, her name is Lori Bergman. Here's what precipitated before this interview. So at the end of August, I uploaded my first interview for The Kennel, the Honorable series, which I'm almost done producing for my honors thesis. I uploaded my first interview with on The Kennel with a guy named Cyril Fote. Now, I set it up with him in May because he was running in the primary election for that same race. The guy had about $50,000 of donations in his campaign coffers, and half of that was self-funded, and he wasn't taking any corporate PAC money either. And that last one is really the only requirement that I have of any candidate who gets interviewed. Cyril had far and above the most money in that race, so I was thinking that he had that primary election in the bag, especially considering that he was really running on a lot of policies that would, I at least thought that a lot of his progressive policies would get people hyped up for him. On top of that, I personally met him at the Nashville City Council, where he came out to show support for the lobbying effort during the public comment section of each meeting to get the council to pass a resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. But anyways, I set up an August interview with him back in May after that city council meeting. I didn't even reach out to confirm the interview until the night before, like 3 months later, after the primary election already happened. Turns out he lost the primary to Lori Bergman, and I hadn't even heard about that. Now, we still had a great interview, but naturally, I had to follow up with Lori. The FEC reports showed no money given to Lori at the time, so I wanted to learn more. What did she do to win? Now, Cyril, in this interview here, he had chalked it up to Lori's name, like physically being first or at the top of the ballot. In this interview, Lori, understandably, thinks otherwise. And I'm going to play that clip for you. I might need a cut here. So I guess the first thing I want to kind of get your perspective on, so Cyril Fote, he attributed your victory in the primary to your name being on top of the ballot, like physically on top of the ballot. What would you attribute your victory to?
Hard work, good old-fashioned campaigning, getting out there talking to people. Not sitting in a booth at a festival and expecting people to come to you, going out and speaking to them, handing out as many cards as possible, making calls myself, sending out thousands of texts, just working hard and going to places where the other candidates might not go because maybe only 4 people were going to be there and I had to drive 2-3 hours to get there. So just good old-fashioned campaigning. And I've heard this now from both of my male opponents, which in my opinion and most other people's opinion is very childish, to say one thing, and just being a poor loser and running against 2 men as a woman and winning. So that's a lot of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, oof. Ooh, dang. I don't really have a foot in that debate. I don't really have much evidence as to whether or not it was the name being on top of the ballot or her doing effective campaigning. I'd have to chalk it at least partly up to that, right? Because I can't imagine that I don't know. I like I said, I just don't have enough like stats on like voting behavior. For people who maybe just haven't heard of any of the candidates, like how they, pick their names on the ballots. I don't really have a foot in that debate. But yeah, nonetheless, pretty spicy. I don't want to call it infighting necessarily. I think even Lori, she said it pretty calmly and pretty simply, and just kind of wanted to move on from there. Now, as it turns out, with regards to the whole FEC reports, Lori is on disability insurance, and because of that, she could only raise $2,000 at a maximum before the primary. The FEC only requires that a federal candidate submits reports when they reach $5,000 in donations. So, that would explain the discrepancy. She's got a treasurer now, so she is working to make those records publicly available. But as I noted in the overview for this episode, this interview with Lori was notable for a couple of reasons. I elaborated on that first reason in the description for the interview. Quote, towards the beginning of the interview, Lori mentioned something that, admittedly, I don't consider much, if at all, when preparing to interview a candidate, the biography on her campaign site. If memory serves me right, the only time that a candidate's biography became a main point of discussion in any interview on here was when Santa Claus from North Pole, Alaska, stopped by to talk about his campaign for his state's seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. That name is not a typo, and neither is his town. 9 times out of 10, however, when a candidate stops by, I'm neurotic about getting down to business. What policies do you support? How will you get them? How will you get them passed if elected? And so on. Lori demonstrated how my shortcut can miss some key aspects of a candidate's viability for the office they seek. Recognizing that oversight, I wanted to highlight a key portion of her biography that shows her past experiences and justifies some parts of her platform. From Lori's biography, quote, all my life experiences have convinced me to run. They have given me great empathy and understanding, which will serve me well when I am representing the 6th District. I needed women's reproductive health care when I had a miscarriage years ago, and I shudder to think what I would have to go through today to get the help I need now. It's hard to believe that my grandmother had more rights 2 years ago than my college-age niece has now. I became homeless when I fought a landlord who was harming the disabled and the elderly in my apartment building. He retaliated against me, pushing me out of my apartment, and within less than a year, I was living in my car, and did so until I could find affordable housing again. My dog and I barely survived. So, believe me when I say, quote, I will put myself on the line for you, unquote. I will, because I have already done so, and I will do it again if necessary. I'm a first-generation American from a long line of immigrants from the former Yugoslavia. I know how hard immigrants work, and that the majority, by far, are good people and deserve to be treated with humanity and respect. I know how hard it is to deal with childhood sexual abuse because I've had to heal from it, and I stand with all survivors and their right to prosecute their abusers without any time limits. I was raised in an extreme religion and understand how people can be easily sucked into cult-like groups and deceived. And as a disabled American, I understand what it is like to need help from the government and how all the programs work because I have had to actually use them. All these experiences will guide me as I represent the people of the 6th District, unquote. Her biography makes her qualification to represent the people quite clear. She's had firsthand experiences with the issues that Congress must address today. She understands the urgent need for enshrining reproductive health care rights into federal law. She knows what it's like to be homeless. She's well accustomed to the barriers and hurdles that immigrants face. She's experienced in working through the unnecessary bureaucracy associated with the essential social welfare programs that many Americans need today. I say all of this to demonstrate that while I appreciate the directness of an issues list on a candidate's website, the biographies can illuminate candidates' priorities quite clearly. And I'd like to thank Lori for kindly reminding me of that. I'm a big dog, not an old dog. Still learning new tricks, unquote. Now, I left it at that in the description, leaving a little plug for today's show, teasing how I'd compare her biography to her opponent's, John Rose. I think this comparison will, in part, demonstrate why I choose to interview candidates who don't partake in the normalized and legalized corruption of our American political system. Quote, John is a lifelong Tennessean and a lifelong resident of Tennessee's 6th Congressional District. This is his home. In fact, he is the 8th generation in his family to farm in Temperance Hall, a small community in DeKalb County. He was raised in Cookeville, where he and his family live today. John graduated from Cookeville High School and continued his education at Tennessee Tech University, home of the Golden Eagles. He studied agriculture at Tech, an easy choice for him, since farming has always been a passion of his. From there, John earned a Master's of Science degree in agricultural economics from Purdue University. And last, he went on to Vanderbilt University, where he earned a law degree. Unquote. Hold up. This guy went to Vanderbilt Law after getting his master's in agricultural economics from Purdue University. That doesn't scream working class to your average voter, but hey, congrats, bro. Ahem. All of that education was so that he could be fully equipped for whatever career opportunity might allow him to fulfill his dream of owning and operating the family farm, unquote. Having reviewed the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics Occupational Outlook Handbook, I can confirm that you don't need a law degree, especially from an elite private university, to run a farm. In fact, the most that one would need is a bachelor's degree. But the pursuit of education is worthwhile, I suppose, especially if you want to develop a career, as Open Secrets reports, in selling your soul to bankers, the payday loan industry, insurance companies, the prison industrial complex, and an interest group who I'll leave unnamed at this time. I'm sure you can imagine who this is. An interest group that lobbies on behalf of an apartheid state that's plausibly committing a genocide, per the International Court of Justice. I'm not going to go through those cases again. I'll link those in the description. Anyways, though, back to this biography, I guess. Today, he is living that dream alongside his wife, Chelsea. They attend Jefferson Avenue Church of Christ in Cookeville and deeply care about... Lost my spot here. Deeply care about investing in their community. They are volunteers with the Tennessee State Fair, Tennessee Tech University, Tennessee Future Farmers of America, FFA, and more. One of their favorite volunteer efforts is the Lancaster Independence Day Parade, which is held annually on their farm the Sunday before Independence Day. Yes, nothing screams man of the working class like hosting an annual parade on your own property. But again, I digress. Quote, John is a farmer and owns a small IT training business and is pushing the conservative movement that inspired so many as President Trump sought office for the first time. Chelsea and John proudly supported President Trump in 2016 and again in 2020. John continues to proudly stand for the fundamental principle that guided the Trump administration, putting himself, America first. Little slip of the tongue there, total accident. Quote, John is hopeful for the future and seeks to hand off a better America to his children, as his parents did for him. He and Chelsea believe they were given their biggest blessing the day their first child, Guy, was born. Tragically, the Roses lost their expected son, Mac Wayne Rose, in November 2019 due to an unexpected complication during pregnancy. Mac is buried on the Rose farm. The family is now blessed with a third son, Samuel Sam Jeffrey Rose, born in March of 2021. For their children, and for all those young people who will one day lead our nation, John believes we must take bold action to solve the debt crisis, renew Christian values in our society, protect our borders, and bolster our military. Unquote. I'm going to cut here. My contact in my eye is bothering me. Woof. Now, the loss of an unexpected child is tragic, and I'm sad to see that the other contender in this race also had to wrestle with that kind of grief. That said, that should not distract anyone from his last sentence there. Representative Rose, quote, believes we must take bold action to solve the debt crisis, unquote. Now, this is the typical right-wing invocation for justifying spending cuts to essential programs like Medicaid, SNAP, etc. In reality, however, the so-called debt crisis is a self-invented one that can easily be solved by abolishing what Moody Analytics chief economist called a, quote, totally anachronistic, unquote, debt ceiling in a 2023 Guardian article. Well, I'm not going to try to find it. I'll link it in the description there. I'm not going to worry about showing it on the screen. Experts at the Economic Policy Institute and Brookings Institute support that decision too. Rather than eliminating an invented issue, however, Representative Rose would rather maintain it to keep reducing funds for social welfare programs. More insidiously, Representative Rose seems to think we need a renewal of Christian values in society. The implication that Christian values inherently improve a society is downright offensive to any of his constituents who don't subscribe to his religion. I know this is going to be a radical take here, but you can practice a different religion and still be an outstanding contributor to your society. It's a fact that any rational adult accepts, and one that any congressional legislator should also accept. But Representative Rose, for whatever reason, seems to think that this perceived lack of Christian values is some kind of issue that needs to be solved in the nation where, ostensibly, the freedom of religion exists. He also wants to, quote, protect our borders, as if the Biden administration hasn't already been doing what Representative Rose's party has been wanting it to do for the past 3.5 years, according to this 2024 BBC article. I already went through this article once before, and it's pretty clear. Biden, both as a number and within the same time frame, as a percentage, his administration actually deported more immigrants than the Trump administration. On top of that, Representative Rose also wants to, quote, bolster our military, unquote, that, according to the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, already received more funding in 2023, quote, than the next 10 countries combined, unquote, while failing to pass, quote, its 6th audit in a row, unquote, that same year, according to a 2023 Responsible Statecraft article. Now, that's what John Rose stands for. he makes it quite clear in his biography that he is a man who thinks that our government should act to benefit corporations and the ruling class, not folks like you or me. This guy supports a presidential candidate who has repeatedly stuck his middle finger up at First Amendment rights when he declared just a few months ago that we should throw people in prison for burning the American flag, according to a July 25th article from The Hill. He also stuck a middle finger up to women's rights with his appointment of the Supreme Court justices who shifted the balance of the court and therefore made it possible for the court to overturn Roe v. Wade. He also stuck his middle finger up at workers' rights when he cheered on Elon Musk's practices of firing striking workers, according to an August 12th Newsweek article. Oh, and how could I forget? Allegedly attempted to overturn the 2020 presidential election. Quote unquote, allegedly. Frankly, I'm just kind of saying that because we're legally obliged to, but because if you look at this new special filing from special counsel Jack Smith that dropped a few days ago, he's the guy who's in charge of prosecuting the election interference court case. If you look at that, you'll find a lot of new stuff in there. And if Trump loses the election and ends up having to go to court for all the election interference stuff, he is going to get pounded. He is fucked if he loses the election this year. Because, once he goes to court over this, it's going to be game, set, match on the whole Trump mystique, at least for people who aren't TFG, because I'm sure that a lot of people in his own little cult are probably not going to listen to a word of this whole hearing. But I digress. I'm not going to go into all the new findings in that. I'm going to include a link in the description if you want to check that out yourself. Anyways, I'm digressing here. Saying that Representative John Rose supports Donald Trump would be an understatement. This guy practically eats Trump's boots for dinner weekly, if not daily. He's a Christian theocrat and is going to legislate as such if reelected. So, obviously, Lori Bergman is clearly the better candidate in this race, despite the differences we hashed out in our interview. I'm going to take a drink of my Red Bull here. I'm getting a little bit hoarse. As hoarse as RFK Jr. But here's the tricky part. If you check out the interview on the Kennel, you'll also notice that Lori's got about $7,000 in her campaign's bank. $7,000. John Rose, again, according to Open Secrets, he has well over $1 million in his campaign's war chest. It's David versus Goliath to an extent I don't think I've ever seen before. And, of course, as the story goes, every now and then, David does beat Goliath. But nonetheless, I was reminded of that during this interview with Lori Bergman. And the purpose of my work on the Kennel was reaffirmed to me. Lori is not going to get much attention from national media outlets. She did get a few profile pieces done on her in different local outlets, but in terms of larger outlets, like even the Tennessean, fat chance. The most she got from the Tennessean was a brief mention in this pathetic damage control opinion piece in which David Plaza gives this weak explanation as to why they weren't going to host any empty podium debates. I was actually going to do a whole segment. On that. Actually, I guess I did broadcast the segment, but there were technical issues during that segment, so I decided not to upload the recording. But I digress. This is like the only article she's even gotten like a mention in from the Tennessean. And Nashville is part of the district that she's running in. John Rose, on the other hand, he gets a mix of puff pieces and tabloid-ish scandal articles put out about him for his kid making silly faces during a speech in which Rose laments his hurt feelings over Trump getting held accountable in a court of law for, again, allegedly attempting to overturn an election. And again, only using the word allegedly because as a public radio station, we are obliged to give you the facts and then, give a... and then, we can give you our opinions. So you get those kind of articles, and then you'll also get these more scandalous, tabloidish articles, like this one on him marrying a college student at age 45. And here's the thing, okay? Done right, sure. These things are newsworthy, but all the coverage seems to focus on just that and says nothing about the fact that this guy is beholden to, again, bankers, the payday loan industry, insurance companies, the prison industrial complex, and the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, which lobbies on behalf of an apartheid state that's plausibly engaged in a genocide. Further, for those who haven't watched much of my stuff on the kennel, this was one of the most contentious interviews that I've had. The one with Lori Bergman. Burping again. Probably shouldn't be drinking a Red Bull during recording, but nonetheless. This interview that I had with Lori Bergman, it demonstrates that not only can I have disagreements on specific issues with candidates who reject corporate PAC money, I can actually have an honest discussion with them about those disagreements. For instance, with John Rose, if I asked the same hard-hitting questions about his support for Israel, based on his campaign page, he would say something along the lines of, quote, "We must continue," unquote, to, quote, "stand ready to protect our ally," unquote, "the great, glorious state of Israel," almost coming in his pants. And I'd just say, cool, except you're literally paid by AIPAC to say that, as Open Secrets reports, and that apartheid state's atrocities would suggest that we should halt weapons sales immediately. And the discussion would end there. There's nothing he could say that would convince me that he's an honest actor on this issue, or any issue for that matter. And while Lori and I certainly had our disagreements on the presidential election and very slight disagreements on Israel and Gaza, we were just able to hash them out and not have to halt the discussion because we were going back and forth about whether or not she's corrupt. Here on the kennel, not only are you going to get interviews that are unimpeded by arguments over whether the guest is corrupt, you're going to get that kind of news media coverage that actually emphasizes the normalized nature of corruption in U.S. politics. You're not going to be subjected to superficial scandals or funny moments alone that don't even mention, oh, by the way, this guy is also a fucking corporate shill. Now, yes, we still laugh at the silly antics that get reported on in the news. For those who tune into the live WMTS version, you'll know that I always say in the intro for the broadcasted version that we're going to nihilistically chuckle at the mess we're in. Hell, I started off this semester with a massive segment on the DNC chaos this summer, including a whole portion on the JD Vance couch fucking memes. I still laugh at all the weird shit that happens in U.S. politics, but that doesn't mean I try to outright ignore the corruption rotting our political system. And I certainly carry that attitude to all of the interviews that I do on the kennel. Y'all, this is what I mean when I talk about our unnatural state of affairs. There is nothing natural about politicians bootlicking a fascist on a congressional floor. There is nothing natural about news media outlets making a ruckus about this guy's kid, making silly faces behind him, and then saying little about his pathetic allegiances to said fascist that he's literally delivering in that same video on, again, a congressional floor. There is nothing natural about corporations and wealthy individuals effectively being allowed by law to prop up stooges like John Rose so he can legislate in their favor instead of his constituents' favor. And there is nothing okay about our news media outlets hardly being bothered to report about that system of legalized bribery. I aim to cover elections with that lens on the kennel, and in the process, do a hell of a lot better job than corporate media. Now, some might say, "Puh, big dog, you're saying you do journalism, but you take a perspective on certain issues. Doesn't that make you biased and therefore unable to do objective journalism?" Oh, I love objective journalism. Oh, it makes me just cum my pants so hard. Oh! Such a journalism has never fucking existed. I've already done that ramble on the show. I'm not going to do it again. You can find that on my Substack, The Kennel, in a post. Did I link it up here? No. I'll be sure to link it in the description. You can find it in a post titled 3-29-2024, Vanderbilt University Insanity, the Role of Objectivity in News Media, especially regarding coverage of the plausible Gaza genocide. And actually, I just realized too, while recording here, I actually also cited it in the paper that I read for the intro video to this, to the honorable series that I'm doing for my honors thesis. So in that episode and in the intro to the honorable series as well, I cite a bit from the conclusion to this book called The View from Somewhere by Lewis Raven Wallace, in which she proposes a new set of journalistic ethics for news outlets to consider. Quote, "I propose hanging on to some basic tenets of traditional journalistic ethics: verification and fact-checking, editorial independence from political parties and corporations, clarity and transparency about financial and political conflicts of interest, and deep, thorough sourcing. I also join a chorus of journalists who have been gradually replacing objectivity with the practice of radical transparency about both our values and methodologies. Finally, I think defining our values as journalists when journalism is under attack means admitting that we are activists and becoming clear what we are activists for. These are the standards that I abide by. Verification and fact-checking. Always do that through my thorough list of sources linked on each post and in the editing process before broadcasting. Editorial independence from political parties and corporations. Now, it should be obvious that I maintain editorial independence from corporations. I also maintain that independence from political parties, but I get why some might suspect that to not be the case. Yes, I am social media operator for our school's chapter of the Young Democratic Socialist of America, and if you're watching the video version, you'll see that I've got that Middle Tennessee DSA shirt hanging up in the background on the quote-unquote set of the kennel, which is literally just my living room. But anyways, I want to focus on the wording of that phrase. First, editorial independence. That doesn't mean rejecting affiliations with political parties. That means simply not letting political parties have direct editorial control over your content. Now, while I am the social media operator for the MTSU YDSA chapter, the chapter has zero say in what I broadcast. If I cover something related to their issues with the approval of our steering committee, I'll share something from the kennel on our Instagram story. But while I love my comrades at the YDSA, I do not let them determine what I broadcast here. Second, political parties. So So technically speaking, the YDSA and DSA, they're not a political party. They are a 501c4 nonprofit. Now, they do pull some weight in different elections by either getting their members to run as Democrats and then endorsing them, or flat out endorsing candidates who happen to share their political views. But nonetheless, technically not a political party. All that's to say that while some debate bros might try to say, actually, you're not like, you don't have independence from political parties. No, I'm guided by my own biases on this show, not those from a political organization. He also mentions clarity and transparency about financial and political conflicts of interest. Lewis Raven Wallace does in that little conclusion. I think everything I just said should demonstrate my commitment to that principle. He also mentions radical transparency about both our values and methodologies. Again, you know my values. You know my methodology, especially with regards to the guests who I invite, especially with regards to choosing the guests that I invite on the kennel. And finally, he closes with admitting that we are activists and becoming clear what we are activists for. Again, it's pretty simple. The Kennel is an activist news podcast that calls for an end to this legalized bribery, for an election process that facilitates candidates' campaigning with public financing. That's not a socialist wet dream either. They're trying to do exactly that in New York for the first time this year. I'll link an Open Secrets article in the description. Looks like forgot to pull that up for this segment. All of this is to say that what I do on the kennel, yeah, it's journalism. Sure, commentary, opinions, and bias are thrown into the mix, but really, no matter how hard journalists and editors of news outlets have tried throughout the years, commentary, bias, opinions always gets thrown in, based even on what information you include and exclude, what you emphasize and minimize, and how heavily or lightly you promote the pieces that you do. Unlike those outlets, I choose to, apparently, do a radical and wild thing. I choose to be honest and upfront about what I stand for in my work on the kennel. So today is October 7th, the one-year anniversary of Hamas's attack on Israel, which resulted in roughly 1,200 people being killed that day, roughly over half of them civilians, based on reporting from France 24. For the past year, Israel has responded like a toddler with a temper tantrum and an arsenal of missiles at its disposal. According to the Euromed Human Rights Monitor, as of August 21st, Israel has killed over 48,000 people, at least 43,592 of them being civilians. That is a 90% civilian death rate. And that's not to say anything about Israel's obliteration of the Gaza Strip's infrastructure, the International Court of Justice is deliberating on whether Israel is committing a genocide, its finding that Israel is, in fact, an apartheid state, and all of the other escalations that Israel has committed against its enemies, including the recent invasion of Lebanon, and bombings of Beirut, and explicit promises to retaliate against Iran for its missile attack on Israel, which it launched as a warning to say, hey, Israel, don't invade Lebanon. Oh, yeah, and then there was actually a letter sent to the White House by 99 doctors who made it out of Gaza who said they estimate the number of deaths to be over 118,000 people. those are the kind of estimates that we've got in terms of casualties. Now, that letter, of course, doesn't say, how many of them were civilians, how many of them were combatants, but I don't have this one pulled up. Israel has estimated that, I believe it's about, what was it? It was somewhere between 20 to 40,000 Hamas militants. So if the death toll is actually at 118,000, there's no way that you're not looking at a majority of civilians killed for this for this entire quote unquote war. Y'all, I don't have much more to say on this topic at this point. I mean, I literally last semester, I think just about every segment that I did on this show had to do with Israel, or at least the overwhelming majority of them. If at this point you think that we should continue what we've been doing this entire time, where we send Israel whatever weapons it wants without any kind of requirement to abide by international law, either you are pathetically indoctrinated, incredibly psychotic, and bloodthirsty, or both. We need an arms embargo. We need to see the International Criminal Court issue arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, head of Hamas Yahya Sinwar, and the Commander-in-Chief of Hamas's military wing, Mohammed Diab Ibrahim al-Mazri. Think I pronounced that right. The chief prosecutor of the ICC has requested those warrants months ago. I don't know why the ICC is just waiting around to issue them at this point. It's insane. Until we see one, actually, we probably need to see both of these things happen. Until we see both of these things happen, it would not be unreasonable for you to start making your World War III draft dodging plans. I sure am, because I ain't gonna fight on the side of an apartheid state in such a war. Fuck that shit. Hey friend, that's all I've got for today, but thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of The Unnatural State of Affairs. The Unnatural State of Affairs broadcasts on WMTS 88.3 FM in Murfreesboro, Tennessee from 5 to 7 p.m. on Mondays. The broadcasted version is censored, but I do also have a full DJ hour in the broadcasted version. I mostly play punk rock music and some rap music as well. And if you can't tune in at that time, though, you can also find the uncensored versions of all my talk show segments that day on my Substack, The Kennel, and you can also find audio-only versions on Spotify. If you liked what I had to say, hit that like button. If you have any thoughts that you want to share, hit me up in the comments section down below. And if you want to be notified of the next upload that I make, hit that subscribe button. You'll get an email in your inbox the next time I make an upload, and you'll also get a notification through the Substack app if you have that on your device. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a good one.